We recently visited Cloud Imperium Games offices in Santa Monica, California to talk with Chris Roberts about Procedural Generation for Planets version 2.0, and we also talked about expectations for Alpha 3.0 coming out soon and featuring demos at CitizenCon. We talked to Sean Tracy as well. Those interviews will be uploaded separately. And before getting to that content, this is brought to you by Antec with their new Cube case designed by Razer, a mini ITX solution that uses an aluminum outer shell and acrylic windows for the side panels.
We are working on 3.0. We've got a couple of things we're working on, but we're working on Squadron 42, obviously, and we're going to show a little bit of that at CitizenCon. We have 2.6, which is going to have Star Marine, which is the sort of FPS game mode with a whole bunch of improvements for the gameplay when you're doing FPS. So we just showed this video about the kind of vision stabilization tech we put in, which is essentially mimicking what the human eye or the brain does when you're moving around. Because if you actually, like take that camera and attach it to your head and run around, you'll notice the camera does this, and that is not the way you perceive it when you run around.
Right.
And it's important because we unify the character, so we don't have a separate animation and we don't have a separate mesh or skeleton for when you're in first person from third person. So pretty much every first person shooter out there has a separate animation and specific like body positions for the first, so you can see your hands in front of you. And if you actually pulled out to a third person view, it would look really weird or bits of the body would be missing. So I think you can actually go online and there's sort of glitches where you can go in Crisis 2 and sort of see the character stretching and moving around, or in a bunch of other places like Counter-Strike and stuff where people sort of
Battlefield.
Battlefield. Yeah. So pretty much everyone does. I think Arma kind of does the same thing we do. It was but the biggest issue for us is to sort of have it all feel really sort of smooth, but because usually what happens in Call of Duty, you have all these beautiful animations when you're interacting with stuff, but it's all from first person and it's all in single player, and if you play the multiplayer, the animation sets are much more limited.
Right.
And that's true also when they did Crisis for multiplayer, for the reasons that there's a disparity between what you see in first person view when you're faking it and what really is happening. And for us, we don't cheat at all. So where our gun points is where we're shooting, right? That's another big difference. Almost every FPS point is wherever the center of your screen is where you'll shoot, and your gun and everything else is just sort of move generally in that direction, and the bullets do not fire straight from the muzzle of your gun. And you can, in other games, I don't know whether I've seen videos for that, but definitely, if you went to a third person view when you were watching first person and say the Crisis stuff, you could be pointing this way and the bullets would go that way to hit the center of the screen. So none of that's fake. So when we actually aim, when you go down the sights, character actually does all this, everything. So it's all 100% accurate, and one of the reasons is so that when you're running around and you're doing stuff with your friends, what you see them do is actually what they're doing. And that's really important. I think that's and we're probably doing that to a level I don't think anyone else has done that. And I think it's that's more important for Star Citizen than it is for Squadron 42, because Squadron 42 is a single player game, so we could have faked it, but since we're trying to have one system that works for everything, we spent a lot of extra time to try to get this work, and there's a reason why a lot of people haven't done it, is because it does take a lot of work. So we're quite happy and proud with where it is. We showed it on this video just this past week that got a fair amount of pickup, and it's very cool. So that will be one big thing that's going to be in Star Marine, as well as better weapon handling, feeling, other things like grenades and dedicated game modes. Plus, we're doing a lot of work on Arena Commander itself to make that a sort of. It hasn't really had a lot of love and attention since we sort of focused on 2.0, which was the large world, and so we've gone back. We've changed the flight handling and the modeling, and balancing things to be more sort of up close, dogfighting. So we're just about ready to actually roll out to. We have a very small test group. We call the Evocati, or whatever. I don't know. How do we pronounce that, Jeremy? Evocati. There you go. Evocati. Evocati. Anyway, so the Evocati, they're like our first wave of community testers. And so they test stuff very early. Like basically, they really are like a QA department. But we've been balancing and testing some of the flight changes and model changes internally, and we'll roll out to them. And hopefully, the dogfighting is going to be sort of more up close and have a bit more of the original sort of Wing Commander spirit, because our sort of speeds had kind of gotten faster and faster over time, which meant that there's a lot of sliding and overshooting, and so we've rebalanced things and also changed some stuff in the flight model. So those are going to be pretty. So 2.6 is actually going to be gameplay wise pretty big, because the FPS section will be there as a game mode you can play. Plus, it will have had a lot of additions to make it more fluid, the gun handling better, all the rest of stuff. And the Arena Commander side of stuff will have had a lot of attention to make that better and make it more robust, and the matchmaking and the lobby and the UI and all that. Right. So we're sort of focusing to try and make the experience of just jumping in and dogfighting, or jumping in and running and gunning to be fun, and that's what 2.6 is. And so that will be released sometime after CitizenCon, which is this October 9th. And then long term, what we're working towards is what we sort of showed at Gamescom, which was sort of the preview of 3.0. 3.0 is probably the first time you could say that when you get out there and you fly around, it will feel like a full game or a complete game, because you'll be able to go between locations, buy and sell stuff, earn money, do all the sort of things that you normally would do in, say, something like a privateer or a freelancer. So that's the sort of first step to the persistent universe getting fully fleshed out. I mean, there's a lot more to be done, right? So there's a lot of like locations, world systems, additional professions, because we're going to start with just cargo, sort of hauling, buying, selling, trading, mercenary, bounty hunter, piracy, which is sort of the kind of the core professions in most sort of space games, right? So you're either taking stuff from A to B, you're either protecting someone taking stuff from A to B, you're trying to rob someone taking stuff from A to B, or you're going after someone that's robbed someone going from A to B, right? So those are kind of what all those professions work with. And then, longer term, there's a lot of sort of secondary professions, whether it's sort of rescue and recovery, or going out and refueling people that are out of fuel, or mining, or salvage. So those are sort of professions that will be coming along sort of after we get the first lot out. And we're concentrating for 3.0 to try and have one star system roughed in. So it's not going to be done fully polished, but at least the major locations should be there, or mostly there, which would include a whole bunch of not just the landing locations, of which I think we have 5 major ones there, but also a whole network of space stations and satellites and refueling stations and all the rest that you would stop off in your sort of travels around the star system. Because for us, the star system itself has like a lot greater density of like action, interest. It's not just you sort of stop and there's one space station that you go and trade in, and then you leave and go to another star system. For us, just this star system should be something that a player could spend a whole bunch of time going back and forth. And now with the new sort of planetary tech that we've done, you can if you see a planet, as long as it's not the sun, which would probably burn you, you can land on it and go around and adventure around. So there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff in 3.0, so it's a huge task. So we are in the process of doing a whole bunch of stuff towards that. Along the way, we're going to show a preview of the next stage of the planetary tech that we have, which will be at CitizenCon. So we're going to what we call Procedural Planets V2, which is a lot more artist authored and driven. So it uses procedural techniques the same way that World Machine or someone does, but it's very artist driven, which is also kind of the same way World Machine is. And so we use these techniques to allow artists to build a world out at scale, but they're determining where the continents are, they're determining where the forests are, where the mountains are, where the desert plains are. And it's pretty cool.
So how's that determined in the engine when an artist, is this manually going in and picking locations for different I guess, biomes, or is there?
Yeah. Well, that's what happens. So we built. So there's a bunch of biomes that are built. So the artist sort of creates these different biomes, whether it's a a mountain biome or a desert biome or a forest biome or a woodland or whatever you would have in the biomes. And then there's an overall sort of map for the planet, and there's both a height map and a distribution map. And the height map sort of determining the general height of the terrain. Now the biomes themselves also are additional to that height. Sure. So the shapes of the mountains is sort of a combination of the overall height map and the biome data. And then the distribution map is determining like where the, say, trees or the vegetation is, and that's kind of how they sort of build it. So it's almost like, imagine you start with just a sphere, and ultimately, I mean, right now I don't think we paint our height map on the sphere, although I think we may be able to now. We can now, right? So originally we just did it on a texture map, but the ultimate idea is you have the sphere here in what we call planet ed, and you basically just sculpt it. So you can push or pull it like you would in a sculpting program for the height map, and then you would paint on top for the distribution map, like, oh, here's desert, here's forest area, whatever. And then based on that and the biomes you've created, it creates the world is sort of, so you're like sort of painting on a great scale. So, and then on top of that, besides just that general distribution map and the height map, you can go in and specifically paint areas, and you can paint areas with brushes that you can go all the way from a few meters in size all the way to hundreds of kilometers inside, and then you specify what's going to be in your brush. You say, oh, I'm going to paint this with some trees or rocks, whatever, and you can paint on basically a planetary scale. And so that allows the artist to totally craft their environment, and they can also place specific art, so they can create like I don't know, a mine shaft or ruins or something, and then they can basically carve out an area in the planet and place that in it. So it's very much built as a tool to allow them to build this at scale. So I guess if you think of the sort of tools they had for CryEngine on a much smaller scale for building the maps they had, imagine that, but on a planetary scale.
Sure.
And that's what we've been working on. And V1 that we showed at Gamescom was a much earlier, more rudimentary version. The new version that we're going to show is, I think, going to be pretty impressive, especially considering it's on a planetary global scale. And we are doing some like crazy stuff, so I'm not sure if it will, although I suspect it may do, but we're doing planetary clouds, and the planetary clouds themselves are going to be simulated by a full weather simulation. So we're not doing a flow map anymore. We've sort of decided that a flow map wasn't going to be tenable for artists to maintain that in terms of textures and everything. So what would happen is the biomes themselves would specifically, and the artist building can get areas and say, yeah, this is a hot area, this is a cold area, whatever, and then based on that, it will drive and create the weather ecosystem and clouds. So if you time lapse the planet, you should see weather systems and everything.
That's cool. We talked about procedural generation really early in the process, maybe a year ago. And I think back then one of the key points you were driving is that it's not randomly seed generate a bunch of stuff. There's actually artists hands-on with the planets. So is that true for, I guess on a grander scale for all the planets in the game? Is this everyone's got their hands on a planet at some level, or?
Yeah. So I mean, so there will be artist and designer involvement in every single planet or moon that will be in the game. Now, of course, we'll have set up we'll set up a whole palette of biomes,
right? And
an artist should be able to crank out a moon or even a base planet in a day or 2 days themselves. Which, relatively considering the fact they're doing, like in the case of a world, 16 million square kilometers, or 16 billion square kilometers. I can't remember. It's a lot. I'd have to look at what.
Big number.
Yeah, very, very big compared to what you normally do in a map, which is usually something like 4 by 4 kilometers or something. It's pretty impressive. But yeah, the tools are all built up so they can build these things at scale. But it is authored. So but we will, like for moons, there's a lot of moons that will kind of like look the same, and we'll have like a moon set of various biomes, and you could probably, an artist could probably crank out 5 moons or 6 moons in a week for you. Because once you've got your building blocks, some things will be quicker. But everything, there isn't going to be a manner where we hit a magic number and it's like, poof, here comes a planet. We are designing it. The game is manually designed, which means that as we build out the universe, it's not a matter of us just turning something on. We actually have to create those. So one of the long-term, sort of schedule challenges is building out the universe that we've in all the stretch goals. I think we got up to 100 star systems. I think we actually have about 110 now. We're not going to have all of them done for the day we say it's released, because we can't be able to get them done, but we're going to try to get a good chunk of them through. So the creation of all those planets with the additional interest, because it's not just about a planet, it's about the planet with its local ecosystem in terms of life. So there we are plans to have whatever animals or creatures down there, but also not just the major landing locations, but other smaller locations. And those, in fact, in this week's Around the Verse, there's a little piece where the German studio is talking about some of the modular building sets they're using for satellites and using for little habitats, right? So the idea would be that we would have these sets, and then you could say, well, this kind of area of the planet, maybe there's some farmers or settlers, and it would also, you could either hand place some of these pretty quickly, like bam, here's a little farm, or you could have a set of it, and you could just sort of determine that from the distribution map there would be X% chance of having some of these little homesteads. So, because that's all important to make these worlds sort of feel rich and detailed and not just empty of life.
The authoring tools that the artists are working with, you've got, I guess, different biomes at a top level. You were saying you manually place specific objects like ruins, things like that. Anything else in there for the actual tool set?
Well, I mean, seriously. So in the biome itself, by the way, the biome itself isn't just, say, some of the art. The biome ultimately will have like all the rules for like whether there's like creatures in that biome, and some of the logic and interest that would happen with it. And then the system, as it's taking it, takes some of that, not all of it. So that's kind of like some of the magic of how the biomes get applied. It doesn't take literally the whole biome verbatim. That's like a blueprint that it takes some of it and blends it with other elements that it's close to, and there's various rules for how it gets done, so that way it doesn't all feel like it's a carbon copy of the other biomes. But the biomes ultimately will contain much more data than just, here's the rocks, here's the trees, here's what the mountain looks like. It will contain the rules for wildlife and all the rest of the stuff.
Is that all done in CryEngine, or is this a separate tool?
I know it's all done in. We don't call it CryEngine anymore.
That's
we call it StarEngine.
That's fair.
It's quite detached now from what the base CryEngine is. We do it in the editor. So there's a whole section in the editor called Planet Ed that you open up, and that allows you to specify and build the biomes and everything. And then in the actual editor view, you can do whatever you want, and then you can zoom right down to ground level. It's pretty awesome.
So I guess when talking about procedural generation, the core challenge that would be faced, I would think, is a concern of having too much copy paste, like you were just talking about. So the rules that are in there, is this the system or the computer kind of looks at what's surrounding the area, performs all the calculations, I guess, based on more rules?
Well, so basically what happens is that the biomes, depending on which biome's next to the other biome, there's blending rules that happen, and there's blending on multiple levels too. So there's sort of different levels of detail, and they all get blended. And then if you had, say, 2 or 3 versions of the forest biome, then it would also be picking between those and elements in them as it's distributing the stuff.
Right.
So I mean, the concept is that you should not really be able to look at an area and feel like there's a repeated tile. And on the newer V2 stuff, it's pretty impressive that. I mean, if you pull out the repeated stuff is kind of the same repeated stuff you see in real life. So if you actually look at Earth from certain levels, you can actually do it in Google Earth if you want. But you pull out to a certain level, you can sort of see it looks, the mountain ranges and stuff all look like they could be tiled. So, we've spent a lot of I'm not quite sure how many. Is it 4 or 5 blends? I don't know. In the texture, we blend a lot of. So we blend at different scales of textures. So when you come down, because our big challenge is, you can see this planet from orbit, and you fly above it from 20,000 feet, or you can be walking, amongst a forest.
Right.
And all of it needs to hold up to our sort of texel density. So when you come down, we need to have the detail in the ground and the rocks and the trees all match up to what you're used to when you're sitting in a ship going around, say, a constellation, or you're on a space station and stuff. And so that involves having sort of different sets of textures that are also pub mapped, and various different items that get distributed and have different LODs that match all the way from sort of being there on the ground in first person all the way to, in orbit.
So this is all version 2.0 of procedural generation.
Yeah, I mean, some of the blending, some of that texture stuff was in what we showed in Gamescom. I mean, you could see in the Gamescom, you could see it from distance as you came down, and then you could see up close that the ground texture had decent detail. The difference with 2.0 is, you saw some popping in the Gamescom demo when you were coming in. In V2, you see almost no popping. It blends really well. And there's just a lot more variety. So the planets have a lot more feeling of a sort of what you would consider a real planet, or more authored, as opposed to that sort of procedural feel that you get on a lot of planets.
So links in the description below for more information on that. We'll post a link to the Roberts Space Industries website so you can figure out when that is, live stream, stuff like that. And as always, Patreon link in the post video if you want to help us out directly. Subscribe for more content because we have additional interviews from this meeting. And I'll see you all next time.
All right. Thank you all, guys. Thank you very much. And anyone that supported Star Citizen, thank you for supporting Star Citizen.